Good morning. I'd like to talk today a little bit about the figure of the rebel, the divine rebel. One of the teachers, the modern teachers, who spoke very eloquently about this figure was Bhagwan Rajneesh, Osho, a very controversial figure. And he outlaid this notion that the future human, the human of light, this new potential for humanity, would be a rebellious being in terms of a human being whose very foundation was freedom, the notion of freedom, individual freedom, and enjoyment of life, but not in a destructive way, which is a very beautiful and positive, powerful message, I think. And there's a very good book called The Rebel by Osho, which details his talks, which are very radical. I'd like to add another dimension to this idea of the future human being rebellious. And this is poignant perhaps to people who are drawn to these teachings, to Gene Keys, because my teachings, that is, because we're all quite rebellious, and the people drawn to these teachings are quite rebellious because they are all about individual freedom, and they're also about collective kindness, collective intelligence. So I'd like to bring that aspect in and see what we're left with. Because in a way, one of the things that I find interesting is that in the modern sort of world, secular world, or in the spirit, even in the spiritual modern world, this notion of individual freedom has been taken so far, which is wonderful, but is in some cases gone so far that it actually has compromised itself. Because you can do all things, all manner of things, in the name of freedom. In the name of individual freedom. You can harm others in the name of individual freedom. And also you can fully not take responsibility for yourself in the name of individual freedom. So there are all these temptations to say, well, I can say what I want to say and do what I want to do, and damn the consequences. And particularly in things like Gene Keys, you can blame your behavior, sometimes your bad behavior, let's call it, or your unpleasant behavior, on the system. So you can say, oh, I've got this gene key in this place, or I've got this line, or if you're a human design person, you go, well, I have this channel, or I have this gate, and it makes me behave in this way. And this is why I don't like people, that kind of thing, because I'm one of these. And all these excuses, that we can use to justify unkind behavior. And I find I just find my position hilarious now, because in a way, what has become rebellious is to go back to quite traditional values, because that's what many of us have gone away from in our rebelliousness. And actually, the figure of the rebel without benevolence is a terrifying figure. A rebel that isn't kind, that isn't considerate, that isn't empathic, that is a terrifying figure. That actually isn't a rebel, that is a reactionary. And I ask you to look at yourself and go, well, is the thing you're attached to more of a reactionary, or are you truly a rebel? And in the gene keys, we have this gene key called the 49th gene key. It details this. And it has 3 levels. And the first level is the reaction. And that's the shadow pattern, where you just react out of your emotion. And whether your emotion is authentic or not, that is how you behave. You react from that. So it doesn't need to have any moral connotation. Whatever it is right. Whatever I feel, I can express it. I'm free to express it. It's my expression. It's perfect. It's a part of the universe. It's part of the cosmos. I can express it to you. Now that's a view. And it's a dangerous view as well, in the sense that, and what if you hurt people? And you can go around hurting all kinds of people. You can go around creating all this chaos behind you with that attitude. If you add the layer of kindness, the layer of consideration, then you have the gift of rebellion. You have the gift of revolution. That's the 49th gift. And revolution is considered because it comes through the heart. It doesn't just pour out through the emotional body. It considers the feelings of others. It considers from the collective because it's the heart. The gift is the heart frequency. So it's always considering the feelings of others, and it's like the gene key of conflict, diplomacy, and peace. The 6th gene key. You create conflict by just reacting without any consideration. Because you create conflict, because it's a mess, because your emotions just fly out, and your opinions, you just share them regardless. Here's my opinion, da 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 da. But you haven't really considered, well, how's that opinion, going to affect people? What better words might I choose? What less reactionary words might I choose? In order that opinion can actually be heard. So there's a delicate balance here, and in all things, contemplation is the key, because contemplation gives you a moment of pause before you speak, before you share, before you thrust your opinion, before you blast out your emotional agenda. Consider the effect it might have. That's what contemplation does. It creates space around the energy that wants to emerge. It creates this pool of calm, of quiet. And even if the energy in the middle is powerful and could be full of anger, it could be, there's this space around it, a breath, and then you can share authentically the energy, and yet there is this space, because it's rooted in a sense of care. It's rooted in a sense of self-responsibility. Now, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes the emotion or the opinion just fires out because you can't help yourself. That's human. And then you have to use the contemplation afterwards. And you look back and you go, well, that caused a bit of a stir, didn't it? That reaction. And then you can go in and you can say, if you need to apologize, or you need to kind of just, not for the emotion, but for the way it was expressed. Not the emotion itself, because that was authentic, but the way it was expressed, the timing, perhaps, as well. So, the benevolent rebel is really the most powerful being, because a kind rebel is someone that, to me, is a truly balanced being. So when we speak and when we share and when we, express what's inside us, for me, that's a deep consideration. We don't get to justify ourselves using spiritual systems. We don't get to justify our kind of bad behavior. Yeah, I mean, this is a moral... I know I'm being moralistic here. You know, goodwill has fallen out of vogue. I mean, it really has. Like, in this modern age. Goodwill. You know, I mean, good, ethical, Christian even, or Islamic, or Buddhist values. You know, all these great teachers. You know, Buddha. You know, he had this experience. He had this realization. He like saw through the veil. And he's like, what shall I tell these people? You know, because they could so easily misunderstand what I say. And I don't want to give them a dogma. Right? And yet he went in and he said, I'm going to come up with these values, these 8 values. You know? And they were all about right speech, right conduct, right thinking. You know, he gave them a moral code he gave to us. He said, look, you know, you react without thinking, without any of this, you will create more karma, negative karma in the world and for yourself, more difficulty. You know, he gave spiritual, moral values to us to remind us. Christ the same. All the great teachers, the same. Goodness. It's based on goodness. Now, look, you know, we're not always good, but in our hearts we probably are. We don't always behave well in a good way. But, you know, benevolence. It's the essence of what I'm here for. Someone recently accused me of being a do-gooder. Oh, that's a good one. Absolutely. I am a do-gooder. You know, I have no shame about that. I'm here to do good. I wish to do good. This teaching is here to do good. The whole basis of the Gene Keys and my big book is about doing good, doing right. You know, it doesn't mean you can't express, you know, you can't know what's unpleasant. You have to start with the shadow. But to raise the frequency, to approach the gift, to open the heart, you have to do good. You have to think well of people. You know, so these basic, ancient human good values are the basis of any true spiritual path. You know, I know there are spiritual paths, radical ones out there, but this isn't really one of those radical ones. You know, if you're drawn to one of those ones that just, you know, have no boundaries at all, you know, I respect that, but it's not this way. It's not my way. It's not the way of Gene Keys. You know, so I want to be clear about these things. Like, be proud of being a rebel, but be careful about being a reactionary. You know, and be considerate as a rebel of others' feelings. You know, that's why at the core of Gene Keys and our communities is this value of courtesy. You know, if you don't like it, this is the wrong place for you. You know, if you can't be courteous in your exchanges, generally, then this isn't the place for you. I'm not the person you should be listening to. Find someone else, or just do it. Find yourself. Trust that. But this is who I am. You know, I'm a do-gooder. So I want you to be clear about that, whoever you are. Because I'm clear about it. And I think it's a message for our time. You know, bring back these powerful, you know, values of kindness and consideration and empathy, and combine them, graft them onto this fearsome, beautiful, rebellious spirit, the love of freedom. And then we can create this powerful collectivity, you know, where we're not homogenized and we're not following homogenized creeds and codes and dogmas, but we are rooted and grounded in our goodwill, in the basic human spirit of goodwill, consideration, kindness. You know, that's powerful. That's rebellious. To be kind, you know, someone throws a punch at you, you think well of them. How much more rebellious can you be than that? I mean, it's not to say that you'll let them walk over you. You can make a stand, but your stand can also be rooted in compassion. Whatever action emerges appropriately from that compassion is correct. But it's not that you then throw the rock back at them in their face. You may, but you might do it in a way that has kindness, if that's possible. In which case the words will convey that kindness, even in the tone. Even though you may have to be fierce with a boundary, there can be a kindness and a authenticity that's deeply powerful. So, compassion can also be sometimes harsh. But you have to know where it's rooted inside you, in the softness and the love that's inside you. So, a little bit of a fiery message today.